Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and this is July the 12th. So we are at Friday. Time really, I say this a lot and I don't mean to be cliche, but time does seem to really be flying by pretty fast because we're already almost halfway through the month of July. In fact, good morning, Alex. Yeah, I was just mentioning it. We're at July the 12th and it's time just really seems to be motoring ahead. And so it's just interesting to me. I am very much in a space of, it's interesting. I'm actually, I was going through, I had a few things that I had to try to negotiate through this week. And good morning, Melissa. And good morning, Suda. Got it. Love everybody joining us this morning, which is great. I feel like it's today's definitely been a much lighter day for me. I know I had a few heavy things this week, and I had some really good Rouhani last night because I had a client last night, and again, I'm not going to talk about the client and her situation, but it was more a case of because when you like any kind of energy healing, when you give a treatment, you will get a treatment. Okay, so really, it was almost like I had a burst of Rouhani last night, in addition to the ones that I do on myself, that, and this morning is just, everything just feels like very much lighter. And some of the things that I have been, how we rack our brains against certain issues and things, like the solutions, have kind of fallen into place, which they always do, but we, again, there's that thing of trying to trust that, obviously there's certain actions that we have to take, but also trusting that the universe is going to guide us in the right direction. So a problem that I've been wrestling with has been solved, at least for the time being. So that's good. So I feel what I really want to do is put my energy into a lot of things. I think one thing I want to start with today when I'm talking to everybody is about just telling you about some of the things that are coming up. I am definitely geared up to do some more with classes. I was asked if I did the dream analysis class at the end, a couple weeks ago, I guess. End of June, and I'm going to invite the people who took the class before, but also anybody new who wants to, that we could have again, probably at the same cost, not a high cost, to do a dream analysis workshop. So if people want to come in and workshop their dreams with the group. It can be the same, I'm going to, of course, invite the same people who took the class as kind of a continuation. And people who did not take the class, it's going to be, I'm not going to reteach the class within that, but, I certainly have certain worksheets and stuff, and I can just give a very quick, update on what things are. But to sit down and kind of go through with people the stuff that they're working on, or even if people are having things like dreams in a series or things like that. I talk a lot about dream and dream interpretation, and, good morning. And so I'm going to be doing a bit about, so I would like to do a follow-up workshop. I was requested that I do that. So I'm going to be offering that at some point this month. I am offering a couple of in-person things as well. This is, I'm finally getting back into working in Milford. And so if anybody follows me on Facebook, I know Karenna of the Riverside Wellness Center. Riverside Wellness and Treasures, is that how she has it now? She's changed the name a little bit because she's added the Wellness Center. She expanded out. And the Wellness Center is beautiful. I was down there yesterday. I took some photos of Karenna and I. And I'm going to actually put together another piece just to show people. Because it's a really lovely space. And it's right on the Delaware River. It's a gorgeous place to go. And I'm going to be teaching Osuishiki Ryoho 1, which is Reiki 1. And I'm going to be teaching that for her on the 28th of July in person, and good morning, Sam. And so I'm going to be teaching that, and I'm also giving a free informational session on Rouhani for people who want to do Rouhani in person in that area. And so I'm kind of spreading the word about it. I already do have a Rouhani appointment in person, and I am going to be doing a couple of them. I'm looking right now at kind of Wednesdays, Fridays, whether I do that every Wednesday and Friday or just couple times a month. I don't know. It's going to depend. But my schedule is filling up with those. So that's a really good thing. But of course, anybody who's locally and would like to take those, I invite them to take it. Reiki is actually very good. One of the things that I've told people with Reiki is that it's certainly definitely a great place to start with energy healing. And it's and I always recommend it for people, particularly who suffer from chronic ailments. So if somebody has CFS or fibromyalgia or just some other condition, where even people with MS and things like that, who have conditions that may be chronic that are managed, or dealing with some kind of pain management, Reiki is really good for that. And at Reiki level 1, which now there's different schools of thought on how one actually performs it. In fact, Karena and I were having this conversation yesterday, because she was not taught that with Reiki 1 that you have to keep your hands on the client. And a lot of people have told me, oh no, I've never heard that. The thing is, it's kind of Reiki 1 is like the first opening. It's like the first level. So the energy is not, the more, when you go to level 2 and then, and possibly the master attunement, then, it's almost like having a little hose that just kind of opens up, or a little opening. It gets broader. So at the beginning, to make sure the person's getting the maximum amount of Reiki, you keep your hands close. And it's interesting to see how many different schools of thought. She said she was even talking to people who were saying like, oh, you should never put your hands on a person. I'm like, well, yeah, of course you need to build it. I mean, I understand there's some people who don't want to be touched, which is why they oftentimes don't recommend Reiki 1 for professional, when you're doing it professionally. I mean, like I said, unless you're like combining it with massage therapy or something like that, in which case, the client already expects you're going to put your hands on. Reiki 2 and above is where it becomes easier to do things where you can do distance healing, where you can, you can move, you're much freer, you're much freer to move around than it is with Reiki 1. Not that you can't move around with Reiki 1, but it's, but it's more like you want to retain close contact. At least that's the way that I was taught it. So, yeah, so anyway, I'll be teaching that class. It's, I think it's from like, I think if I remember, it's 10 to 4 or 10 to 5. Basically, I always do the morning session, and then I do the attunements, and then people will kind of break for lunch, and then we come back and we do the practice. So, yeah, it's always great. It's always wonderful. It's a great way to get free Reiki treatments, probably more than one. And Reiki is a very powerful modality. It's a very powerful physical healing modality, and it can provide a lot of emotional release and stuff as well. Like I said, I talk about Rahani. That's Reiki on steroids. so Rahani is something like when people, have gone through a lot of things, maybe already have a lot of spiritual practices, have been doing a lot of stuff, and and again, people can walk into Rahani as totally beginners to Reiki to energy healing in general. So that's not an issue, but it is very powerful, and I'm just really happy in the work that I'm doing. Like the client I had last night had said to me that, she was probably going to book more sessions because she was dealing with some, what she's personally using it for. She's finding that it's helpful. And she's like, yeah, this is something that actually seems to be working. So let's keep going with it. So, yeah, so that's always a really good thing to hear, that it's something that people are finding is helpful. But like I said, with an angelic healing modality, angels, and again, regardless of whether you're coming at dealing with angels from from a monotheistic faith perspective, let's say, or whether you're coming at it from the point of view of somebody who's more of an esoteric practitioner who may or may not incorporate that. Either way, when you're dealing with angels, you're dealing with very, very potent energies, and you're dealing with they're kind of no nonsense. It's like, oh, okay, what's the issue? Okay, well, here it is. Here's the fix. they just move in. So, so sometimes you have to try to tell them, it's like when there's a particular issue, like if somebody has had a naughty problem, a lot of times, and this is actually going to dovetail nicely into what the topic is for today. A lot of times we have topics where the cards that I pulled this morning when I asked about reading, this is not all of them, but the main one I pulled was the Outsider, okay, which is a 5 of Pentacles, right? But this is the 5 of Pentacles, not in the material sense, but this shows the child standing outside of the, looking at the beautiful thing on the other side, but he's blocked out. And the meaning of this card is that oftentimes it goes back to the kind of script that we have about feeling rejected when we're children. Oftentimes when we're kids, I don't know. It can vary widely. You can't just say that there's one template for everybody's experience. But I certainly, if I just take my own life as an example, I felt like it was easier to make friends as a kid. Not that there weren't people who wouldn't, not that there weren't people who would bully, not that there weren't people who wouldn't harass, and that kind of thing didn't go on. But it's like you found that you could play with more people as a kid, and then, up until about the age of 9 or 10. And then once you move into puberty, then there's like this splitting off that occurs. We talk about the cliques, the middle school cliques and things like that, where you move into this space now where, everybody has a group, and it's like, are you in this group? Are you out of this group? Like, it gets very tribal. And it's interesting to watch how, if we were being watched by another species of aliens, and they might, it's funny when we watch like, David Attenborough or somebody on TV talk about different groups of animals and how they behave. You imagine the aliens watching us and going, yes, well, they do this curious thing where then they all form these little tribes. And, it's really interesting when you think about it from a detached perspective. But that's one sense of the outsider card. But with it came the cards fighting and guilt, okay? So what is that? I think the three of those together, rather than just looking at the one card, are what's important here. Because a lot of the times when we have that outsider perspective, that's when we may feel we're rejected, when people don't understand us, when they don't understand our work, they don't appreciate our work, when they don't, when we feel like, we want to be accepted or we want to be successful, but somehow we fall short, okay? That's that feeling that we can often have. So what this really says to me here, there's another sense to this card. There's another sense to this Five of Pentacles energy. And that is that we can do this. We may, when we're in that kind of a situation where we feel like we're on the outside, we may form a defensive kind of an attitude. Okay, we may form something where we feel that we need to protect ourselves. And again, depending on the situation, everybody's life situation is different. Everyone's reason for feeling that way will be different. It is one of those things, and I've said this many times, so apologies for being repetitive, but I feel that, but I remember an intuitive body worker who I had worked with at one time telling me, she said, if you really want to boil everybody's, the core of what really makes people suffer, it has a lot to do with isolation and insecurity. Those seem to be the main two things. If you sit down and look at any problem that you have, it could be either a conflict with another person, it could be, or a challenge. You could be in an environment. It could be a family thing. It could be a work thing where, there's somebody who's there who's, for whatever reason, they just, you don't feel like you fit in with that group, or you feel like this person is going to be a bottleneck, or they're always going to challenge you, or this or that, or, we think about at least here in the USA, if you think about the whole Thanksgiving thing of like, oh my God, what are we going to say and not say during Thanksgiving dinner? To provoke the one uncle who has all these things to say that just, there's that, it's that interpersonal dynamic thing that goes on that is that has a lot to do with this. But it can have to do with other things too. Like I said, if we're working hard, maybe we feel like we're not getting enough of a raise or a promotion, or you get all the work of everybody dumped on you, and you're not, and you're still not making the money. There's always the situation where we somehow feel where the issue that we have is we kind of feel like we're a bit on the outside. And again, there's a whole spectrum of that, from feeling left out to being outright abused. There's a whole spectrum of possibilities there. And it will be different from people. But regardless, we often develop protective reactions to those events. Okay, that's really the point. And so this guilt and this fighting, what happens after time, okay, as we get older, and as we develop as people, and as you get older and you start to feel more secure in yourself and who you are, okay, so, because as we get, they always talk about the idea that, when when you're a teenager, you're kind of figuring out who you are, and in your 20s, it's still kind of this whole thing of choosing your life path and your identity and your career and establishing yourself, and then you get into your 30s, and then you start to care less about, you start to feel a little bit more about who you are, and then as you move towards your 40s, 50s, etc., you're reaching a point where you see the memes about there about by the time you reach 50, you're like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care what anybody thinks, but which may or may not be true. But it's just the idea that you are, the more and more established you are in your own identity and in your own, your own rootedness in who you are, the less the outside world is able to affect you. Now, again, that doesn't mean that we might not be sensitive. It doesn't mean that, if people say mean and critical things to us, that we're not going to get hurt. But when we're more established in who we are, it doesn't necessarily breed that level of self-doubt, where we feel, where we want to put ourselves forward confidently. And if somebody attacks us or pushes back, then we kind of go, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't put myself forward. You can fall into that kind of a thing. So the fighting sometimes, but so you can have situations like that. Let me stay on track here. You can that can happen to you, but then you also may eventually we kind of find some place where we feel like we are, we're in our niche. We do have our friend groups. We do have the people who support us. A lot of times, and again, there are a lot of times there's a tendency more to focus on what we don't have rather than what we have. That's the typical Four of Cups energy. We're staring rather dissatisfactorily at the three cups in front of us when there's one being held out to us here that we're not seeing. The opportunity that we don't see. We're dissatisfied with what's in front of us. And sometimes it's just everything's going along okay, but we're bored. I mean, there's a whole different variety of ways that this dissatisfaction with where we're at manifests. And then we may get into certain patterns. And the point of this card is that these are often patterns that come from childhood, or they come from these experiences when we're younger, and we feel, we're in that kind of tribal thing where I have to defend who I am, I have to defend my identity, and I need to stand up for myself, maybe in this situation, or if you've been made to feel powerless, that you may continually run into situations where you're trying to buffer yourself and make sure that you can feel and experience, at least some sense of peace, if nothing else. We're always kind of looking for that. But sometimes, when we've had a major life crisis, particularly when we're younger, when we get older and things settle down, okay, when we settle into, I don't know, having a good job, maybe having a good relationship, having a stable place to live. When all the issues when things are kind of on the level, we still may find that we're responding as if that other thing is still going on. It can, we talk about them as triggers, where all of a sudden someone may say or do something, and it may suddenly put us back in that place that we were when we felt like we were an outsider. And so when we have this fighting card, okay, you have the fighting card and you have the guilt card, okay? So you've got two of these responses. One can be the guilt of, especially if we lash out at somebody, okay? If somebody says something harassing to you, and so does looking internally and knowing oneself counteract powerlessness. It can, but like a lot of things, yes, that's certainly a piece that helps, like that, knowing that that you might be repeating a script. The meaning of this particular card is, like, they're talking about it like it's a cassette tape. This deck was probably created a while ago, but in any case, it's like the cassette tape that plays that same script about yourself over and over again, and they say take the tape and throw it away. That's the metaphor that's used in this card. Okay, throw it away. You because you want to step into your own power, and that's not always easy to do, because you need to really, like I said, a lot of things. It's something you really want to feel in the body. Now, starting with self-examination, maybe some people will do this through therapy or counseling. Some people might do it through coaching. Certainly with the Rahani, with what I've been doing for people, things have been coming up and coming into the surface, and people go, oh, yeah, there was this thing, and I didn't realize this thing is still impacting me, and so, yeah, there's this feeling of, looking at those things and recognizing that that's not the person you are anymore, okay? that, looking for where your power sources are, looking at who you are, what you're confident in, what you can do, what you do for people. And this is not an exercise in narcissism. It's an exercise in recognizing what your gifts are and being able to stand in those without having to take a defensive posture all the time. And again, it's not that we shouldn't defend ourselves when we need to, right? But it's just that but I think a lot of times we may walk out into the world with the assumption that everybody is going to hurt us, especially if we have been hurt a lot, or that somebody is going to do something. And again, it's not that we want to just, be Pollyanna about everything necessarily either. Sometimes, it's not that things don't happen in life that are not that cannot be challenging, or that we're not going to meet challenging people, or that everybody out there has our best interests. But when you're kind of in the flow of things, again, it gets back to not wanting to be in that position where you're constantly looking around and you're worried about where the next attack is going to come from. Because then what happens is you eat up a lot of your life energy worrying about not only what other people think, but just not being happy in who you are. Okay? And I don't say this critically, because it's something we all deal with, some version of this. No matter how much spiritual work we've done, no matter how much therapy we've gone to, we have this, there's always going to be that thing. And the origin of that thing, we want to see whether that origin is that tape. Frequently, I will get, for a lot of people, I get the Five of Cups card, okay? And the Five of Cups is about letting go of the past. It's about grieving and letting go. One thing that I'm finding that Rouhani does is it allows people to grieve whatever that is. Whatever that is that didn't happen, or whatever that situation was, whatever it is for whatever person. And everybody has their own version. It allows you to grieve it. And that way you can finally push through it and pass by. Because a lot of times, if you just think consciously, if your life is basically going okay, but you have this nagging sense that something's not right, or that you have this this feeling, you frequently, when you're on your own, when you're alone, or when you're not in a situation where you're busy, where this stuff starts to come up again, okay? Or we see ourselves in a situation where maybe not everything's going our way, and we find ourselves repeating a certain pattern, then we are, when we find ourselves repeating a certain pattern, then we, sorry, I had some text messages coming in, and I was trying not to look at them while I'm saying, so I'm losing my train of thought. We find ourselves repeating them, and again, that's a very, very unconscious thing, because what it points to is the fact that script that we had is a thing that we are, it's a thing that we're just still doing. It's a thing that we're continuing to do over and over again, and and so that is, because we're continually replaying that particular script, that's what's really happening there. So what's happening in the present may or may not be, we may be seeing it through, we may not be seeing the reality of what's going on. This is part of why I think people catastrophize. They look at things and they say, we see a situation happening and we think that there's an old situation that's replaying itself again. And we may respond in certain ways. You could respond, sometimes if things may be going along great, somebody could say or do something that hurts you, or that kind of burst your bubble a little bit, and then a lot of times people will withdraw. They'll withdraw back, and they may kind of go into this space of the kind of I'm not loved kind of space, and want to pull their energy back. Or people may go into a space, or people may just turn around and automatically have a defense. They're more of that Mars or Aries kind of a thing, where they may turn around and say, yeah, well, same to you. with, you know, I mean, we all have the things that we do. And I'm not here to judge the rightness or wrongness of people's responses. People do what they're going to do. But it's interesting to note that if these are behaviors that we don't want to engage in, if we just kind of want to get on, because people are going to be people. You're never going to be in a space where everybody is going to love you and everything that you do all the time. It's just, there's too many people in the world. If we study the behavior of group dynamics, there's always going to be, you know, I know there's people out there who don't like what I do, and I'm just like, you know, you reach a point, and some days it bothers you and some days it doesn't. But the reality is going to be that not everybody is going to like or appreciate what you do. And I think that's what wounds us too, especially if we're doing it because we're very, you know, with good intentions, or even more so because we're putting our real selves out there, especially people who do art, or people like who do art or music or write or do things. There's always that fear when people turn around and say, like, you know, oh, I don't like that. And that's so if you put your actual heart out there and then somebody's kind of gone and said, well, I think that's crap, that can also stomp on you. That can also make you feel like, okay, well, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. And, you know, so it's about how, I think it's, so it's back to what you were asking me, Sudha. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like going back to recognizing that may just be, that's the trigger point. And so how do you correct that? Well, like I said, I mean, one, being intellectually aware of it, some people can do that cognitively. I think cognitive approaches do take time. My understanding about CBT and things like that is it can take years to really de-establish a pattern. I mean, because again, it goes back to what I said about the mind not being totally in control of something. And when the mind is in control, you know, when we think that we can kind of solve everything intellectually, then we might be able to solve it for a day or two, but then it comes back again because we haven't, you know, again, we've taken the weed whacker and we've taken the top off the weed, but we haven't pulled the root out. And I don't know, I think to some degree, just because of the way the human personality and the human soul, vulnerability, yeah, and exactly, and the way that the human soul kind of is, we always kind of have that little niggling voice there that wants to be the critic, and I've talked about this before. But the thing about the inner critic is that it does actually serve a purpose. The problem is because it's still running in that mode of either having to defend yourself by putting walls up against people, not just boundaries, but I mean actual walls against people, and or the way that we either may withdraw from people or the way that we may defend ourselves in situations where maybe there is miscommunication, maybe things are happening because people are not understanding each other. Or just because people are projecting their stuff onto you. If something you say, I had this happen the other day on my other channel. I had somebody come in, and, you know, when you have anything up on the internet, people are going to comment on it. And so I had some podcasts, Hindu podcasts. I had on my Durga and on the ideas of Shakti and sovereignty and things like that. I did that on my other channel. And I had somebody come in with these comments that were just kind of like about how heaven and hell are real and God is going to do this and that. And I was like, yeah, okay. In other words, what I'm saying about this is upsetting to you. So now you're going to start fire and brimstone preaching. I basically took the person off. I'm like, yeah, I'm long past arguing with people about that kind of stuff. I just deleted the comments and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not engaging. This is not a place for you to, that's my boundary. This is not a place for you to proselytize whatever your belief system is. But there's also, to me, there's no point in engaging with that. But it doesn't bother me. There might have been a time when I would have been like really annoyed or felt really attacked. And now I'm just like, yeah, whatever. There's people out there who are going to feel that way. And it's also to the point, I was just finished editing a section of somebody's book that I have to get back to her about. But I know one of the concerns that she's always had around this book was just how people will respond to it. And I said, well, you can't worry about that. And if people are going to respond negatively to something that you're doing, it's probably because you're doing a good job. Because, if the idea is to make an impact, to wake people up to something, in the way that when you're doing something like that, or you have something that you want to say that is going to do that, then you are, then there's going to be some criticism or some opposition to it, because somebody's going to want to fight back against it. Again, probably for their own reasons connected to this, feeling that for whatever reason, something you say or do makes them, Melissa's saying vulnerability, but also makes them, violates their boundary. They're afraid they're going to be wounded, so, the sword is out. We're afraid that, you're going to, by you having this opinion, you're attacking me. And of course, that's classic projection. It's like, no, I'm not attacking you or your point of view. And I think that's a lot of times too, especially women, we kind of tend to have this thing where you try to say things in a very diplomatic way, that's passive voice, rather than actively, aggressively coming in and saying something to somebody directly. So do we like direct, or do we, people say they like direct, but then if you're, and they say, oh, don't be wishy-washy, don't be indirect, say directly what you think. And then you say directly, but people say, whoa, you're too much by saying directly what you think. It's, there's no pleasing everybody, I guess, is what it comes down to. But I think that when we have been in a space where we have legitimately been disenfranchised, and again, that runs on a spectrum from I wasn't invited to so-and-so's party to things that are outrightly abusive. There's a whole gamut of possibilities there. All of them can wound us in different ways. We all have ways in which we can be wounded. Or I wasn't acknowledged for that promotion, or I wasn't acknowledged for this, I wasn't acknowledged for that. We have all of these things, but we have to recognize that, life is going to be about a certain amount of wounding, and the way to avoid it is not to build a barricade around yourself. But yeah, actually vulnerability is the key. Vulnerable is allowing yourself to keep your heart open to people without, to be able to allow yourself to do that in the face of the fact that people might not like you, might attack you, and still say, you know what, that's okay. I am who I am. They're suffering with whatever they're suffering from, or whatever they're dealing with in their life. And it's not a subject of pity. I'm not big on pitying people either, but at the same time, everybody's coming from a place, they may or may not be understanding you, and it's fine that they don't. I guess that's really what it comes down to. It's like you do what you do, and you have to recognize that sometimes if somebody's criticism of you is really bothers you, then it may be a case that that it's something where you need to think about, okay, why does it affect me? Is it more that I'm second guessing myself, or is it more a case of this is something that bothers me about me too? I think that's where one differentiates when we're dealing with shadow work. Is this something that I believe is true about myself secretly, or unconsciously? Yeah, I needed to hear this today. Been down on my work because of a comment I got. And there's, Sam, I know, and it's, I'm sorry about that happening, but there's always people who are going to do that. And if they just catch you at the wrong day in the wrong moment, then you start to question and you start to second guess yourself. And the reality is that, like I said, there's always going to be people, and a lot of times, if there's somebody who doesn't like what you're doing, then possibly you're doing it right. Especially if you're trying to say something that you think is a little bit controversial in the culture, and you're trying to establish something that you're doing in a certain way. You don't want to. You want to, if you're going to make changes, if you're going to adapt to certain things, or you're going to change certain things, you want to do it based on your own inner voice. You want to do it based on what you may truly feel is something that can make something you're doing better, not just because somebody else went, dude, I think that sucks. I've gotten comments like that too. It was hilarious. I did a podcast on my other channel. And it was on, I wonder if I can say her name correctly now. Mictlantecuhtli, I think is how you say it. It's the Aztec death goddess. And I had done a podcast on her because people had asked me to cover her, and I was like, oh my goodness. And literally, I had looked up the pronunciation, and it's very hard to say. You look at the word, it doesn't translate right away. And I literally had comments like, "Oh, this stupid whatever can't even say the word, so she's an idiot. She doesn't know anything." Like I literally would get comments like that, and I said, and as I said, you have to start a comment with "dude." Then I kind of feel like you're not exactly an expert in Mesoamerican scholarship either. So yeah, but you will get things like that, and you do have to wonder about people sometimes. You're like, really is if you're going to spend. Life is precious, and you're going to spend your time just, trashing other people. Like, what's the point of that? But that there's going to be people who are going to do it. And like I said, I have often heard people say that, yeah, if you're, I have seen some of the most successful channels on YouTube. I have seen people who have been doing really, really great work, and then they'll come back and they'll be like, yeah, this is the comment I got, and so funny today, love it. Yeah, it's you will get people who will do that, and it's and I don't know, but I think you have to laugh at it because it's just, I mean, we have to acknowledge that we nobody likes anybody saying bad stuff about themselves. Nobody wants, I wouldn't enjoy coming on here and having people just tell me I'm number one all the time. You know what I mean? But it's just not. It's one of those things that's going to happen. So I think we just need to. I think the point that I'm trying to make with all this, and I'm actually doing our reading right now, realizing it's 7:06 already. The point that I'm actually kind of making with it is that we tend to. It's not always just that we feel like an outsider because of what other people do, but a lot of times it's a question of, how does that reflect what maybe we have learned about ourselves from the time that we were younger. And that we may still be internalizing as part of who we are. That somehow we're not adequate, we're not enough, we're not, where we don't really have any power. People will do that. They will disenfranchise, and it's not. Somebody on the outside doesn't have to do a whole lot. Sometimes we can just do it to ourselves. So there needs to be. That's why I said there needs to be the reestablishment, and it does go back to it being more than a mental affirmation exercise. We want to be able to feel it in the heart. You want to be able to feel it in the body, because that's the point at which it takes. Think about anybody telling you anything. It could be something spiritual too, like talking about samadhi, for example, the idea of one experiencing this place of no-thingness and so forth. And you're like, okay, like intellectually you might kind of get what's going on, but unless you actually experience that yourself, it's meaningless. I mean, it doesn't. It's more of a concept you kind of believe or don't believe, but once you experience it, then it's like, because a lot of these experiences, they go beyond words. Feelings are not about analyzing and intellectualizing, okay? And our central card here for today is courage. And it's interesting because that's kind of, having the courage to be who you are. Having the courage to grow, even if you feel like people around you are, that's still having the courage to grow and to be who you are. And the inner feeling of which we're unaware, this is stars. And actually, it's literally what Melissa just said, vulnerability. That's what this is. This is the silence card. Sometimes there's just nowhere to go but to be in the silence of who you are. But this is the place, this is the sky. This is the place that's pregnant with possibility, okay? This is where all our possibilities and all our hopes are. I mean, could bad stuff happen too? Sure. But this is also the place where we can make our dreams. And the path is never a straightforward one. I think it was Joseph Campbell who said if the path is very straight, then it might be that you're on somebody else's path. Because if somebody just clears the way for you, we usually, when we're trying to sort things out ourselves, there's usually a bit of a challenge. And operating here externally, this is the Ace of Pentacles from a place of maturity. Okay, externally, we've gone through these experiences over and over again. So it's not like the experience that we had when we were a child, okay? You have experiences over and over again, and now we're operating from a place where, from that mountaintop, where you can actually see. When you can see what's going on, when you, and of course, aces, this is an ace, so this is about new beginnings. So it's interesting, because remember the last few days, we've had the 8s and now the 9s, and now we're seeing an ace, okay? So to me, this is about moving into a place where we're starting over, saying, okay, stopping the tape, letting go of the script, or being at least on the road to doing that, and then there's this card of success. Again, that idea of, reaching another milestone, being able to kind of ride the tiger, so to speak, and overcome whatever the challenge is that's in front of us. And of course, it almost also reminds us to live moment to moment. This is the Two of Pentacles, which can be about juggling different things, but really moment to moment is more about just being in the moment. Like this is this guy who is kind of skipping along stones along this kind of rainbow river. It's about we jump from one stone to the next. We kind of go, and some of them might be a little more challenging than others, but we just deal with what's in front of us. We don't catastrophize about the future, and you just kind of just go with whatever's going on around you. But that'll also, living in the present also means kind of being centered in who you are. And so I feel like this has a lot of applicability here, because it's kind of this reminder to be kind of courageous and to stay in the present. I also feel like success, what's kind of coming into my mind, is also just focus on what you actually have achieved. Okay, I feel like there's a focusing here on what your successes are. And Six of Wands traditionally is also a card of leadership. Okay, it's a card of being a leader, of being recognized for what you do. So where have I been recognized? Who does appreciate my work? And again, it's not meant to be an exercise in just surrounding yourself with yes people. It's more about recognize, because a lot of times we are so focused on where we don't have support. Let's look at where we do have support. Let's look at the people who love us. Let's look at the people who have told us, wow, I love your work. It's really great. And also just think about how you feel about your own work. And that does kind of dovetail with something that I had said in a completely unrelated venue to somebody about when they were just very, very worried about, well, I don't know if anybody's going to like my work. I don't know if anybody's going to like this or that. And I said, you have to like it. Don't worry about, whether you're going to make big sales. Don't worry about, just do you like it? Or can you authentically get behind it? Can you passionately defend it? Okay? Is this something you really believe in? If it's something you're just kind of going through the motions because, I feel like this is the kind of thing I should do, then that's going to show. If you're passionately behind it, even if there's people who are naysayers, it doesn't matter. You know. You're rooted in what it is. You know what you're doing. And and ultimately you'll know who you are. The more experience you have, the more maturity you have, okay? The more you know who you are. And other people can't take that away from you. So really, I don't know. As we get older, I feel like we're moving into a space where we're able to, there was that, I think I posted that cartoon on my birthday where people had said, once you get past 30, it's like life is over. And then the girl walks through the door and there's all these rainbows. She's like, wait, what? You no idea. But the second half of life is actually a really fertile time, because this is the point at which, childhood can be too, but it's almost like you have a chance to almost recover that, because now you can live life knowing who you are and what you're dedicated to. And if you don't know, then now is a time for you to explore. Like, okay, rather than, you've paid all the dues, you've done all the stuff, you've tried the thing, you've tried to find what your place is in society or not. And now it's like, okay, this is what I know, this is who I am, and this is what I need to do. So, So anyway, I hope all of that makes sense and wasn't a little too diffuse, but I felt like that's kind of the track. Like we want to recognize where we might be, not only in our interactions with others. It's not only so much about them, but it's also about in what ways are we fighting with ourselves, and in what ways, what ways do we sort of, neutralize the inner critic? But sometimes it's about, like what I'm finding, and again, I'm always going to promote the Rahani thing because I feel like that works. It works so well for pulling up that kind of material and letting us look at it. Sometimes we don't want to look at it. That's the thing. But I needed this exact reframing today. Good. I'm so glad. I'm glad it's, I just sit down and see what comes up. And so I'm glad that what's coming up is what people need, that I'm reflecting back what people need, because that's, maybe I think we all kind of need to hear it right now. It's very, looking at something from the sense of I think the way I had put it was, be the lion, be courageous. Yeah, the courage card was the center one. Be courageous enough to say, no, I'm of value. What I'm doing is of value, and I have, and I'm confident in myself and what I'm doing. We're not talking about this kind of stubborn things, but when we start letting people who maybe aren't into what we're doing, or I don't know, or projecting something onto us that we don't like, we're not obliged to be what those people want us to be. Ultimately, you want to be true to what your own vision is of who you are, because the good news is as you get older, you have a better idea of what that is. And a lot of this other stuff is past stuff. And I'm going to try to show up without the dagger today. I got to tell you, having said that, what is it? Mars is about to conjunct Uranus, I think, this weekend. So everybody, maybe that's why this is coming up. Everybody needs to be careful with the dagger, because and truthfully, I need to say it myself. Like I said, Mars is my Atma Karaka, so my knee-jerk reaction is to I have to temper that quite a bit sometimes. But it's because they said as we get closer to the 14th, our frustration with people, situations, and chaos might increase, and then it'll go back more to normal again after Monday. So anyway, it's so let's hope that that's the case. There's quite a few challenging astrological aspects right now. So that's that. I'm sure that's just it, probably helping to bring some of this stuff to the surface anyway for people. So anyway, we're a quarter past, so thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope this reading is helpful to all of you today. And like I said, I've got these classes going. If you're in the Milford area and you want to either attend the free Rahani thing, or if you want to take the Reiki 1 class with me, and like I said, I'll be having the Dream Workshop stuff, plus some other stuff coming up online. So now that I've got some of these other things out of the way, I'm excited to be working on some new things. Oh, you're welcome. And, hello, Emily. You joining? I'm sorry, I'm just finishing up right now, but the recording will be available to everybody. With the reading and everything. Oh, you're welcome. And I hope you all have a great day. Like I said, you can backtrack and see what you've missed if you've gotten in late. And I will see everybody tomorrow morning. Take care. Have a good day.